Hi and welcome to the July product update for MobileCaddy. Justin Halfpenny here, CEO, and joining me on the call is Paul, our CTO, Todd, our mobile chief technical architect, and Frank, our lead product engineer. We've got a number of updates that we picked out for this month for some special attention. There's a lot more updates coming through in the packages and releases too, which you can find on our product release documentation. To start with, being that we are very concentrated on offline and the resilience of loss of connectivity, it's nice to start with our new Sync 4. Paul, if you can give us an overview of where we are with Sync 4 and any other information you feel may be of interest.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Justin. So Sync 4 is the internal name really for that's our synchronization engine. That's the first one to introduce batching and paging of data. So if you can imagine, until now, MobileCaddy's been going for a few years now, and over that time devices have got more sophisticated. As we'll come on to, we've got obviously the Windows desktop there. There's been greater demand from our customers for increased quantities of data, and we until now we haven't been able to page data. I ask for a page at a time, and therefore we've been restricted by internal Salesforce limits as to the amount of data that we can support. So we've gone now from being able to support several thousand rows of data to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in fact. So what happens now is that the device that's being used will call MobileCaddy or request data in our Sync 4, and we'll actually be able to, the platform will respond and say, I've got X pages of data for you, here's the first page, for example, and then the device can process 1, 2, 3, 4 pages at a time. So we're very proud of it, and it's been tested thoroughly. We've got one customer's already using it, and they've done their UAT, and we know that they've had no trouble whatsoever. So what we actually have, we've got configuration inside Sync 4, enables the customers to choose whether they want to page or not page data. They would choose not to page data if it's smaller volumes and they want to do some more sophisticated sort of analysis or work on there, such as the formula field changing is one. There's a few things like that in there. So choose paging if you're going to use large volumes of data. The user gets to control the sizes of these pages actually. So we'll put some initial values in so that our customers don't have to worry about setting them up. But over time we can analyze the data going down using our increased metrics, which we store against our internal connection session object. So we can actually look through those and advise the customer on different page sizes. You can imagine that different widths of record going down there onto the device, Justin. That will, if it's a narrow record, you might be able to increase the number of records per page. So all of that's there. We've got some more detailed analysis we can do on the metrics as well, and there's some more sort of configuration areas that we can change to make it even more efficient on the governor limits. So something we're very proud of. Large volumes of data is the key, with very efficient analysis and monitoring. That covers it in a nutshell for you.
Brilliant, thanks Paul. Yeah, a couple of questions I've got. One is around the initial sync and then any subsequent sync. So if I've got, let's take a round number, 50, 60,000 records, and I'm installing, and then what do I see on the subsequent sync? So is that still efficient as that comes through sync patterns?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. So you will actually see, step ahead of me there, you'll actually see if you look at the new configuration parameters that there are differences, different settings for initial sync as opposed to a follow-up sync, because as you're alluding to, an initial sync will require all of the data down, so it's large volumes of data going down. But of course, the platform doesn't have to do any analysis to say, well, does that particular device have the data or not, and therefore I'm going to send it or not. And it's quite a lot of complicated processing that goes on in a subsequent sync. So there are different settings for that, and the platform will look at those settings, and so a subsequent sync will come up and do all the analysis work to see what data you've already got on your device, what's changed, and what to tell you to add or to delete. So settings are available, and all of that is written into the metrics, so we can determine the best possible settings for both the initial sync and the subsequent sync.
Brilliant. And just from a resilience perspective, and it might be a chance for you to ask Todd as well, is that
Sure.
you know, if I'm on a device and I'm syncing through a number of pages, and so I'm actually installed as a device, and then I lose connectivity, you know, are we resilient to that in terms of, you know, how the app carries on and then the next point of data retrieval?
Sure, that's another good question. So the actual sync points are very similar. We're looking at pages of data here. If we fail in a page, it's similar to how a previous synchronization, like sync 3, sync 2, sync 1, etc., might have failed just pulling a table down. So we've got the connection sessions are available. Todd, I could actually bring Todd in there, because I'm not 100% certain whether you do a status check around each of those, Todd. Possibly not on initial. You could let me know whether you fire off a page 1 of 1 again to pull the whole lot down, or how you process that.
Yes, so as you said, Paul, we try to behave in a very similar manner to the previous sync versions, and so if a particular like paging request, like 3 out of 10, for example, has failed, we will try to gather information about whether or not that had reached the platform yet or not, and resume where we left off. If actually it was seen to be like a clean break, then we would restart the refresh, and your code would act as if it hadn't seen the rest of the paging come through, and would continue as normal. Yes, it's from the developer's point of view, using the API, it's completely seamless.
Excellent. And from a design perspective, then I don't have to, you know, worry about that drop connectivity, whether it be on a single page of data or multi. And maybe just to round this off then, so if I have an app running today, or I'm building a new app, and I'd like to take advantage of Sync 4 from a platform perspective, Paul, and then, you know, from a development perspective, Todd, Paul, what do I need to do high level to gain access to Sync 4, Paul?
So on the platform level itself, you would go to your dynamic version, your detail page of your dynamic version. There's already a button there to enable you to change the MobileCaddy components. And there are a set of instructions we would send out for this specific task as well that tell you there are 3 MobileCaddy components. You would upgrade the sync refresh to sync refresh 4, and there's another one, the connection session utils, and the column set. They have to be upgraded as well, but the specific versions will be provided in the information we send out. Once that's and don't worry if you make an error, you make a mistake, you get the version of one of those supporting components to Sync 4 wrong, you'll be told about that when you do a refresh, and it'll tell you what versions you should put in. So yeah, that's what you do, Justin. You can go in, run the wizard, choose the ones that you want, and then of course the hard work starts when you actually mobilize the table, and for each mobile table you then have to we'll put some initial values on, so you can just crack on if you're developing. But when it comes to actually performance monitoring, checking volumes of data, and you want to improve the paging, you might want to, increase the data per page to achieve lower numbers of page for efficiency. You would be able to do that by checking the metrics as that they come through, and you've got a wizard there that enables you to change the configuration there on the mobile tables.
Nice. So as someone setting up the platform side, I've got the latest package. I've now chosen Sync 4. And Todd, so from an existing application, so I've got an existing code base. Do I need to do anything more? Do I need to be on a specific version of the utils or anything like that? And then for a new app, do I just crack on?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the major points on the head right there. So for new version, you don't need to do anything because you'll be running the latest set of code. For an existing app, you will be required to use a later set of the MobileCaddy utils and pull those into your app. So you probably need to create a new DV dynamic version for that. In terms of updating your code, etc., there is no need to do that at all. Your existing sync calls will work absolutely without any change. So the hard work of understanding the paging, understanding that kind of batching process is all taken care of within the MobileCaddy utility libraries. So from your own code point of view, you won't need to make any changes. You just need to make sure that you're using the supporting version of the libraries.
Excellent. And I think there's worth just rounding off then that last point around the libraries and the versioning. Obviously MobileCaddy is a lot around version and version protection, not just in production but also in development. And this is something you can see that's slightly deeper than the application version. This is our own MobileCaddy component versions. The idea being is you can then swap those out as you version your own application with very low or minimal and sometimes no impact to both the configuration and the application. So here we've actually swapped from one sync class to another, and we could have done that within the existing app and taken the benefit of the increased data refresh volumes. So I think closing that off and moving on, Todd, I know you've had some particularly client project requests around gaining more information at the sort of user system level. So I wonder if you could let us know a little bit more about those new calls we have.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, these were we got some requests from a particular partner about being able to they wanted to customize some of the UX and the UI within the app based upon some information surrounding the current user at runtime. We already provided some details about the kind of the running user into the application code, so to the developer. But we'd had a discussion with the client about some particular requests they had of extra information, and following a kind of internal chat, we decided that this was actually an extremely kind of sensible suggestion and one we kind of jumped on really to put out. So we've now updated the list of values that are available to the developer to get per user. So they now include things like the user's locale, user role ID, profile name and role name, and actually many others. I think there's like 25 to 30 in total of those that we've added in. And as well as adding in a nice mechanism API to retrieve these, we've added some intelligent caching in there, obviously to aid performance. And as I said, in this particular the partner's use case, they were then able to branch their app code at certain points to, I don't know, maybe undertake a different screen, different UI, or restrict values that a user might be able to input, or auto-populate values of records that were being created based upon those particular attributes relating to the current user. This was actually delivered prior to the Sync 4 release of the MobileCaddy libraries, but it was a JS library update and also a package release on the platform. And as I said, yeah, that's been very well received, and I think even following that request, we've seen other partners use the same logic. Because it's available to them, they can now kind of enhance their user's experience, which is ultimately how we get adoption for our MobileCaddy apps, is by making them useful to the user's critical kind of business case, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I think interestingly, it means that a certain application can be written for maybe 2 or 3 different profiles on the platform with different levels of application logic or interfaces available. So I think, yeah, we'll see that growing and increasing. And I think although we won't touch too much on it today, as we see some of the system objects be possible to mobilize, then that's most likely going to even more increase in terms of the depth of information available. Thanks Todd. I think pushing over to the container applications now, and with Frank, there's been a lot of work around this idea of if there is some failure at some point, whether it be device or platform, application code and so on, around recovery. Frank, I know we've been doing a lot of work around that. Maybe you can give us some ideas of some of the new features coming through.
Hi all. Yeah, that's right. So our container apps have an optional recovery system that can be added, which allows for the diagnostics and recovery of data in the app in the event that there's any cease of function within the application itself. This could be down to quite a few different factors, from communication issues with the Salesforce platform, issues on the device itself, or even with the actual application, so bugs and other things like that. So this month we've added a couple of new features to the recovery system that focuses on improving your users' recovery chances, but also to improve the security of the app around the recovery system. So the first of these features we call local recovery. The current recovery system requires users to have an active network connection to the Salesforce platform, but this limits the times that a user can perform the recovery process. So they need to then have a device that actually has the network connection in the first place. They'd have to have a good signal, and you know, that lessens their chances of when they can perform the recovery. And there's also a lot of external and internal moving parts that factor into this. So if these issues that can prevent recovery in these cases could be down to network issues or hardware. So if the hardware network card in the device itself fails, then they wouldn't be able to access the recovery system at all. So with this new local recovery, a network connection is no longer required. You can perform the whole recovery process and extract any data that may be stuck on the device out of the device onto a secondary laptop or PC, and then this can be given to the support team in you know, if that device is then a working network connection, you can use that or other means. So you're no longer limited to be required a network connection. So let's take a hardware issue, for example. If your user is in the field, their iOS device, for some reason the network card fails, they can't recover, so they then open local recovery. All the same features apply, so they have a dump data button which they can use. This will extract any data from the app itself and bundle it up into a folder which they can then plug the device in to a laptop, pull the data out physically via the wire, and then hand off to the recovery team in other means. So that's obviously increases their chances of recovery, but also with all these features, you may not want your users just tapping away on these recovery buttons whenever they feel like it. So we've added pin protection before they're able to access these recovery options. So what they now need to do, if they launch recovery, they'll be presented with a lock screen and a 4-digit PIN which they must provide to their support team, in which they will return a recovery PIN which they can put into the app and unlock the features that they're used to. So yeah, so that's the 2 updates for recovery to improve your chances of recovery and have more security around when the users actually get to use the recovery features.
Yeah, that's great, Frank. I think, you know, it's obviously always a point of last resort, but, you know, we have the mantra of never to lose any data, and even if it's, you know, a device issue, as Frank, you're explaining there, it's really important, especially if you've been offline or out of connectivity for a period of time or collecting a lot of data that's timely. So this is a really important, it is a last resort, but really important feature to have if you're going to take any real critical processes and you know, move them off platform as such. And I think just to touch on, you know, the security issues and the security concerns around recovery, and Paul, if I can ask, so basically I require, you know, I'm a user in the field and I just can't access this recovery. So there's a platform feature Is that correct? So I have to speak to someone on a system admin level, MobileCaddy access level as a package?
Yes, there's a means of obtaining the number. Is that what you're aiming at there, Justin, for the recovery?
Yeah, so I've got this 4-digit PIN that Frank's kindly given me as a user, and then I can phone you in the support centre there, and only if I get authorization I can actually then access that. So that's all locked down at the platform level, which I think is really important for people, particularly when running critical data is likely to be sensitive data as well.
Sure. Yeah, there's the record that we call it provisioning record, the record that actually sort of tells us which user, which device and which application has a button on it which fires that process off there, Justin. So a process that actually Frank provided. Yeah, it's very, very, very impressive. I know, Frank, did you want to just explain how that works?
Yep. So when the users open up recovery, there'll be two areas. First is a support pin, which is 4 digits they supply to the support team. On the platform side, they will then go to that provisioning record of the user. I think there'll be a generate recovery pin button. This will take them to a page where they enter the support pin that the user has given them, and a 4-digit recovery pin will be generated, which when the user has, will allow that device to enter recovery mode. Without that, they will not be able to enter any of the recovery features.
Excellent. So that applies both to local and platform recovery then, Frank, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, really, really impressive to hear that. Sort of coming on the back of that then, again around security, Todd, there's been a lot more activity around the use of the Windows container app. I know you have a couple of updates and maybe some other potential OSs in the pipeline.
Yeah, sure. So I can talk, I suppose, with some excitement about the fact that we're getting work on the Chrome OS and the Mac desktop apps as well. So this is kind of following the, I suppose, really successful launch so far with the Windows desktop apps that we've got in the field, sort of further clients coming on. The Mac and desktop ones are kind of early beta at the moment, but they're showing real potential, and it's hopefully they'll be out before too long. And I suppose what's really exciting about those is the fact that what we've been able to do so far is to almost completely mitigate the need to change any application code from the developer's point of view of what they're putting in for the apps to be able to run either on the Android or iOS devices, the Windows desktop, and now the Chrome OS and the Mac as well. So far there's absolutely no change in the code they're going to have to write, so that's really, really exciting. In reference to the security piece that Frank was talking about, to continue that theme, we've got the full encryption in the Windows desktop apps now, and actually the betas that we've got out as well running, and that's using exactly the same encryption mechanism as the Salesforce Mobile SDK, which of course we're built on for the mobile apps. So complete parity in that sense, in terms of security, which is obviously an extremely positive thing for us, as that's kind of our first mantra.
Excellent. So we're looking at single application base now for iOS and Android, and again for Windows, and then with these early versions of particularly Chrome OS. I do use a Chromebook myself, knowing how competitive those devices are, and all the different form factors that are available, and often having sort of long form filling exercises as well as sort of tablet functions. I think these new form factors are going to be an interesting move for that sort of deskless worker transitioning between the different tasks. So I'm just going to flip the order a second and move into the platform performance. That Paul, you've touched on a couple of items around Sync 4. I think it's worth noting that everything we do is recorded for the tuning purposes you were saying before, but you've got quite a few more advances coming through in that. Maybe you can touch on a couple of those.
Yeah, I think what we found, Justin, recently is that we're moving from recording things, you know, to aid us in, you know, if there's an issue, somebody's lost connection or the batteries run out, or, you know, somebody's saying that the data's not coming. We used to record all this information really so we could easily analyze and then have a look at the problem. Whereas now there's a subtly different purpose, I think, with Sync4, and that's to actually do performance analysis. So in terms of the Sync4 with its paging and its batching and also the way the data is processed internally inside MobileCaddy, we can now see which Salesforce governor limits are getting squeezed the most, and we can actually now make adjustments to maybe use one over the other, i.e. you might want to, you know, decrease your CPU usage and maybe increase the number of you know, rows queried, or that kind of thing. So we've moved away from just, you know, debugging to actually a performance analysis and actually being able to advise a customer on how to improve their performance. So that's what we've done with the metrics on Sync4, and on that sort of subject, the topic of reducing the governor limits, we've also made MobileCaddy more efficient, particularly in the summarizing. It's actually something you can maybe talk about, Justin, is that, you know, we actually summarize the user's usage for our trust site, you know, so to give everybody more confidence in MobileCaddy right across the board. And, you know, so we don't want to impact a customer's org in terms of using you know, too many processes, too many jobs running, that kind of thing. So we've put in some control in the latest package, which basically says how often the summarization through to our trust site will happen. This is where we anonymize the data and push it through. So we've made some changes there to enable us to, instead of every single time something happens and needs summarizing, we run a process. We don't do that. We run it in as a kind of a schedule, you know, to reduce the governor limits used. I don't know if you want to come in on that, or I could mention a completely different improvement we've made with performance, Justin.
Yeah, sure. I think it's worth just probably summarising the use of the trust site and the anonymised logging, and also the updates that we provide for the client apps where there are any issues coming through. You know, the trust site's been one of, again, I think it's now running nearly a year and a half old as a public release. So these are really important, and I know the sophistication of the applications that we're seeing. So we're not after the sort of point and click, you know, applications. We're looking for some really sophisticated applications that will need tuning, both in development and ongoing, as you would for any application. So I think, no, it's an excellent push forward. I'll probably come back to you on probably the last step, which is how I get my application through, and just touch on a couple of other points from Todd around some of the services, particularly for talking about sophisticated apps now, talking to other requirements other than, say, data sync. Todd, you've got a couple of items coming through on that I think you'd like to mention.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So we essentially what we're going to be doing is updating our shell applications with some new services really that will enable a nice kind of standard access to the custom REST endpoints within Salesforce and kind of actually third-party endpoints as a whole. We had worked previously with partners to kind of enable them to do this. So it wasn't that it was technically not possible, but they kind of needed some guidance, particularly around maintaining the secure OAuth sessions. And we took the decision following kind of further requests coming in for similar types of functions and features to build that into a nice kind of dev-friendly wrapper service within the shell apps. This is kind of opening up the door to using things like the tooling API or SOCL requests and custom REST endpoints against the platform, which will be really nice for the developers. So we're kind of once again trying to remove all the kind of the boring stuff that actually isn't part of their core business logic, and kind of giving the developer the way to can just build what they need to do. This opens up some really nice enrichment opportunities within the applications, for sure, in a kind of a progressive enhancement type approach, really, where if you can do it, if you're online, then these calls may add value to the application, may make the users' lives slightly easier. We've been very keen, of course, to make sure that the partners are aware that for the app to function and to maintain the ability to perform its critical functions for the user, they have to still kind of understand as an offline first kind of base level that they need to provide. But where it is possible to enrich the app further, we're kind of hoping to enable the developers and partners to really kind of give the users apps that are going to buzz. They're certainly kind of fairly early days on cleaning this all up from us, and there's a roadmap in this area is actually kind of growing quite substantially day on day to cater for some of the other common requests we've seen, and also bits and pieces that come up out of the kind of ongoing Salesforce releases, for example. So yeah, hoping that that's going to be well embraced by our existing partners, and of course kind of people potentially wanting to solve problems that haven't yet found a solution.
That's
yeah, really, about that.
Yeah, really interesting, Todd. I think as you say there, we'll have some more documentation and some information coming out around that, but a couple of live projects going through that require that, so we'll see that very soon, I'm sure. And I suppose it's a nice place to wrap up. Well, I think the last item which I think you were going to talk about, which is one of the things we're very proud of, is being able to migrate applications from instance to instance on Salesforce, really removing a lot of the hassle which normally occurs in when you're in the tightest deadlines, trying to get either from one sandbox to another, or maybe sandbox to production. So Paul, I think we've got some enhancements around that you wanted to touch on.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. This is a key area, really, and you can imagine a developer, one of our partners, has gone in and they've created themselves a mobile application. They've mobilized multiple tables. They've said which columns and how the conflict resolution works, and all of that. They've entered all of that data. They want to move it to live. Well, obviously they don't want to go in and set all of that up again. We also don't want to let them loose on tools such as the data loader, because with all our foreign key relationships, that would be a horrendous error-prone job. It'd be a nightmare. So what we do is we provide an export-import mechanism which takes all of the data and puts it into a document, a single document, which then gets migrated over, and they can then import the document, and everything is set up exactly as it was. Makes life much easier. Of course, yeah, when you look back, Justin, our first time an expense app had, I think, a document that was 80K in size. We've got customers with extremely challenging applications, very, very large, and they've actually hit a 5 meg limit there. Very sophisticated application. So what we've done, we've now introduced some compression for the export and the import side of that to reassure the particular customer, and a file, the document that was 5 megabytes in size has now been reduced to under 2, so about 1.5 meg. So we've compressed that. We've got some other ideas as well on the roadmap to actually reduce that even further. But it's what's great, Justin, is that the customers, partners of ours, are making these really sophisticated apps, and they're putting these demands back on us.
I totally agree, and I think it's one of the things coming from the business side many moons ago. It's an area that definitely needed some love, and I think it's still getting some love now with things as Salesforce DX and so on coming forward. But it's one of those places where you don't have the time to look for those problems, and I think maybe we'll have a chat on the upcoming calls around some of the protections, the extra protections as we move from environment to environment. But what we can now see is being able to take, as you say, these very large applications, sophisticated applications, and move them seamlessly between instances, which is fantastic. So I think that sort of wraps us up for the highlights. As I say, there's many more things that have come through in the last few releases, so we'll have another catch up next month. So with that, just really want to say thanks for everyone who's joined us today, and thanks to Paul, Todd and Frank. And also you can see we have this very aggressive release schedule, so if you have any ideas or features that you feel that should be on roadmap or push forward, or any other things that you'd like to talk to us about in terms of projects or solutions, if you can contact us, we have a standard email address, info@mobilecaddy.net, and of course we're very active on all the social channels too. So with that, thanks very much.